Women and DCS, Signs and Symptoms and Prevention, Part 1. My name is Myra Thomas, and I am the founder of School Mermaids and of School Mermaids Dive School. This call will be presented by Chev and Adrian, Siobhan Fortune and Adrian Smith. So on this call, Chev and Adrian are going to talk about important basic knowledge about decompression sickness, factors that increase the risk, how to spot symptoms in women, what science has to say about it, and how to best prevent decompression sickness. At the end, we will have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So this call is part of a project under our dive school named SIS, the Surface Interval Sisterhood, the Surface Interval Sisterhood, or Sisters. This project is an attempt to keep each other connected through learning. It also gives us a chance to learn more about the sport in a fun way between our trips. This is an initiative aimed at bridging the gap between our fundamental dive courses and the actual experience of diving in the real world. Well, if you're here, it's because you're part of the sisterhood. So, welcome to the sisterhood. Our main goal, like I said, is to maintain connection in between trips and to spread good information. We have 3 programs under our sisterhood. We meet online once a month for either the tea time, the workshops, or official courses that we do. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So let me see. We try to keep the calls to about 1 hour plus 10 minutes for the questions. Calls are recorded and available on our website and our new YouTube channel. This will be done within 48 hours of this call. So please keep your microphone muted for the call. Questions can be put in the chat at any time or asked at the end. And we also have a disclaimer. So we're dive professionals, not medical professionals. This is very important. The information we share here is rooted in the limited science available, our professional training, and our industry experience. Bodies are unique, and diving is fun. We just want to help everyone be safer and have the most fun possible. This call is meant to be informative and not scary. So I want to tell you a little bit about who will be teaching you tonight. I am sure you already heard from Chev. Siobhan Fortune is our CAO at Marhusted Trips. She's the director of School of Mermaids and a PADI IDC staff instructor. She's one of our trip leaders, and she definitely prefers tea over coffee. I'm not sure why she does that, but that's one of her things. She's probably drinking
for my
tea
anxiety, Myra. Thank you.
Adrian Smith is a SSI dive master, a DAN instructor, and a very loved member of our community since 2022. We have seen her grow and become a dive professional. She became dive master while since I met her. She has joined us on many trips, and she always wears the coolest eyeglasses. You'll see her in a minute. So I hope you stay awake during this presentation. I'll hopefully see you soon underwater. That's all I have to say. From now on, Chev and Adrian will do their part.
Thank you so much, Myra, for that lovely introduction. Hi, Mermaids. So happy to be here. As Myra said, I'm Chev, and I'm the director of Dive School. Thanks to her trust and leadership. And this is a project we're really passionate and excited about. And I hope that you find it informative and fun. And Adrian, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian Smith. Like I said earlier, I'm in Florida. I have just really enjoyed being a part of the Marmaids since my first trip, and I'm just honored to be able to be contributing now too. So thank you for letting me be here, Myra and Chev.
Super happy to have you. All right, we're going to get rolling because we have a lot of info we want to give you, and we want to try and honor our time slot as much as possible. So here we go. This call is being recorded, as you probably noticed, and we like to keep it available forever, so you can come back and check it out at any time. So first of all, I just wanted to do what I'm calling open water refresh, because something I hear a lot when I'm teaching and diving with people is that they say, oh, I didn't know this. Oh, I didn't know this. And being instructors, we know that you did know this because it's covered in the open water course. But the open water course is a huge course. It's your introduction to scuba diving, and you forget. We're all excited to be in the water. So everything I'm going to tell you right now is stuff that you should have heard before, but I wanted to lay it out for you again in super simple terms. So back to our basics, types of diving injuries. We have decompression illness. So decompression illness is the umbrella that covers lung overexpansion injuries and decompression sickness. Today we're just going to talk about decompression sickness. Barotrauma is everything that has to do with ears. I actually saw a little diagram on Patty's Instagram today that was showing the number of percent of diving injuries, and it's mostly barotrauma. No surprise there. And then marine life as well. So that is why we leave only bubbles and take only photos, because we don't touch anything underwater. Because marine life is one of the biggest causes of diving injuries. And also just a reminder that most diving related injuries don't actually happen while scuba diving. They happen around the diving. So in the boat, at the surface, in the shop, in situations where things are slippery, boat traffic, all those things is mostly where diving injuries happen. The actual act of scuba diving is a very, very safe sport. So let's go back to our open water training. We are open circuit scuba divers, so we breathe air in, we breathe air out, and it leaves our body and scuba unit in the water. Okay, the air that we breathe is about 21% oxygen, about 79% nitrogen, and about 1% other stuff that's in the air. Okay, air comes in, nitrogen and oxygen, and the air we breathe out is mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide. All right. The reason I want to remind you of this is because nitrogen is most of the air we're breathing, but it's an inert gas, which means that it can't be used by the body. It's not something that we use in our normal body process, and that's going to be important when we talk about why DCS happens. Okay, so our bodies are always seeking balance. They want to keep what we call stasis with our surrounding environment. So as we descend into the ocean, the pressure around us increases, right? Water pressure increases. And because nitrogen cannot be used in the body, in that process of us taking the air in, the nitrogen gets forced into our body tissues. So as the pressure increases, the bubbles become smaller and smaller, and they work their way into our body tissues, into our fat, into our muscles, blood cells, all of that. And it's inert, it doesn't do anything to us, right? But as we come up and the pressure around us decreases, those bubbles are going to start coming up because, again, we're trying to find that balance. They were forced in, now there's not that pressure, so they can come out. As we ascend, the outside pressure decreases and the bubbles come out of our body. But it doesn't happen instantly, right? We're trying to find that stasis, but our bodies need a little bit of time for those bubbles to be worked out. So that's why we always teach ascending slowly, and that is why we also always do a safety stop whenever we dive. It's not a requirement, but it gives our bodies a chance to do what we call off-gassing. So at 5 meters or about 15 feet is the correct level of pressure that our bodies can release the bubbles without absorbing more. So off-gassing is the process of shedding excess nitrogen. And it starts the moment we begin our ascent, And it continues until stasis is achieved again. So it doesn't end when we get out of the water, right? It doesn't end at the dive. We continue to off-gas those bubbles for about 24 hours after. Okay? The process of doing all this in your body is largely done by your circulatory system, which is going to be really important when we talk about factors that increase your risk. So what is DCS? That's what happens to your body while you're diving. So what is decompression sickness? Decompression sickness happens when we are on our ascent, we are coming up from the bottom, decreasing pressure, and we're doing it too fast. So outside pressure drops too quickly. Those nitrogen bubbles that are in our tissues, they start to expand, right? And if they come up slowly, they expand slowly and they kind of wiggle their way out. But if we come up too fast, imagine a balloon covered in a piece of cloth, right? And if you all of a sudden blow that balloon up too fast, it's going to break the cloth. So if you have those bubbles in your muscle tissues, in your fat cells, and the pressure decreases too quickly, those bubbles blow up and they're going to take everything that's around them with them. So if we ascend faster than the bubbles can make their way out slowly, we get DCS. So the only cause of DCS is ascending too quickly. The only thing that causes DCS is decreasing the pressure too fast and getting those bubbles to expand too quickly. However, there are factors that can affect the rate of the bubbles to come out. So we're going to talk about that, factors that increase risk. And then just a quick reminder about altitude recommendations. So remember, as I said, that those bubbles are going to keep working their way out of your system for about 24 hours. And so that means that not only doesn't come to the surface, you can't go to altitude and continue to decrease that pressure. So altitude is considered 300 meters or 1,000 feet. So going above that, even driving up a mountain, going for a hike, if you're going above 1,000 feet, you can increase your risk of DCS. So after one dive, the general recommendation is to wait 12 hours. 2 dives, 18 hours. If you're doing multiple dives in days, the recommendation is 24 hours. And if you ever go into deco, you need to wait 24 hours before diving again and before you go to altitude. Okay? So what does DCS actually look like? So there's many different types of symptoms. The one that's most famous, of course, is the bends, right? So the bends actually comes from from where your body bends, because DCS typically was originally thought to be in the joints. So the bubble, it happens most easily in your joints, your knees and elbows, shoulders. But skin bends is actually what's mostly common in women. So skin bends are blotchy, painful skin rashes, and also it can look like bruising. So it looks like a rash, but it doesn't feel like one. It's not like poison ivy where it's itchy and red. It's just kind of like a blotchy texture on your skin. You see little bumps. Or I've also seen it where it looks like you have a big bruise. Neurological DCS is dizziness, confusion, headache. So those bubbles are upstairs somewhere. And of course, there's tons of other symptoms. Not all of them we know about or necessarily associate with. Adrian's going to talk about more that are specific with women, but these are kind of the general DCS symptoms. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adrian.
Hey again, everybody. Adrian here. So, we know what causes DCS, but what we need to do is not only ascend too quickly, but also control those factors that increase our risk. And one of the biggest ones is dehydration. And as divers, and often we're traveling, so the traveling, medications we're taking, I know we're on vacation, there's sometimes more alcohol, caffeine, and just the flying in and of itself and that recirculated air. One of the things up there, just so everybody knows, immersion diuresis or peeing underwater is not about, do I pee in my wetsuit or not? It is that our bodies, due to the pressure, start pulling water to our kidneys into our bladder as part of that, the pressure in the circulation. And so that in and of itself can dehydrate us. We create far more urine when we're underwater and under pressure than we do on land. So anything that's going to increase that dehydration is going to be something you need to pay attention to. Medications, again, medications can increase dehydration, but they can also change other things like making you feel dizzy or sleepy. Especially a new medication, always have that, go over that with your doctor or talk to Dan. We would never say to not take your medication or alter your medication. That's between you and your physician. But there are medications out there that that we all know cause all sorts of things like dizziness. And the last thing we need is to be dizzy and feel drowsy and faint underwater. And then our body health overall. We often are in very hot climates. We are sometimes wearing wetsuits, we're on boats, we're in the sun. Being too hot and overheated is going to increase our dehydration. Being too cold is going to affect our circulation, and women have lower cold tolerance in general. And so we need to make sure we use appropriate coverage underwater. Somebody may be able to dive in a bathing suit and somebody else in the same water needs a 3. So you need to know for you, pay attention to that. In your dive log, write down, what was that water temperature? What did I wear? How did I feel? And eventually you will understand what water temperature, when I go to the river, I know what I need because it's going to be 70 degrees every single time. I'm wearing a 5 because I get cold, whereas there's people out there in the river in shorts. So that is very personal for each of us. Poor fitness, we don't have to be models and we don't have to be Olympians, but we should be doing regular cardio and strength training in between dive trips and taking good care of our fitness. And age, I'm going to be 60 this year, so I'm not suggesting we shouldn't dive when we get older, and there are lots of divers who are significantly older than me and fantastic, amazing divers. The fact is, as we get older, we often have heart problems, diabetes, we're not as fit sometimes, or we're on more medication. So all of those factors together, as we all just talked about, medications, dehydration, age plays a big part in that as well. It is a fact that the older we get, the more serious DCS can be, and the easier it is to get DCS.
And the reason this is so important is because this is what affects your body's system's ability to process that nitrogen, right? So if you're dehydrated, your body cannot process that nitrogen as easily. And so that's why this affects it so much.
Yeah. And it's as Chev mentioned about flying earlier, it's not just during the dive, it's after the dive, and not just flying, but again, dehydration. If you are dehydrated, those bubbles, even after you're on land, are not going to be able to move out of your system as easily. And then getting overheated, deep tissue massages and really hot showers should be avoided immediately after diving, and even strenuous exercise should be avoided right after diving. You need to give your body a chance to let those nitrogen bubbles out.
Yeah, and that's extreme, right? So it doesn't mean you have to shower in cold water after a dive. That's not the rule. It's that just think about things that are increasing those bubbles coming out. Really deep tissue, really intense exercise. You can go for a light run, and again, not immediately after diving. Don't get off the boat and go for a run. Wait a few hours, give yourself some time to rest. But if you're on a week vacation, it doesn't mean that you can't ever take a shower or massage or go for a run. It's just be aware of these things and how they affect the process your body is going through.
Agreed. I like to get a massage while I'm on a dive trip, but again, we just tell them no deep tissue, and don't hop into a hot tub either. It's not helpful. But back to those basics, no matter what, even if we do everything right, we can still end up getting a DCS hit. There's a lot out there that we don't know. Studies are constantly being done, and the dive computers are helpful as opposed to using tables, but there's still a lot out there that we don't know, and we still do things right, and we still end up sometimes with all our best efforts, we still end up with DCS. So, all right, symptoms in women. Most of the symptoms in women are generally the same that we're going to see in men as well. Joint pain is the most common. The numbness, headache, the neurological issues, then blotchy rashes, as we talked about, and that blotchy rash can be painful or not painful. And that's one of the things that Dan talks about, is that there's all these symptoms, but there can also be completely different things. So the big thing is knowing your body and following your instincts if something doesn't seem right. But these are the most common symptoms across the board. In women, more often, we're going to see it in our fatty areas, because that body fat is going to hold more of the nitrogen bubbles than tissue and blood. So our breasts, our bellies, our thighs are going to be often where we're going to see those skin bends more so than others.
A fun fact is that fat holds 5 times more nitrogen than muscle and blood and other tissues. So just because that we do have a higher body fat percentage than men is a factor here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as Shep just said, the body fat in women in general, we all know, is going to be on average more so than men. And again, those nitrogen bubbles are going to collect in those fatty cells before and not off gas the way they do in less fat. And then DCS in women, again, this is technically a repeat, that we are more likely to see it in our skin, in the fatty areas. And again, it's not going to be like a poison ivy rash. It's going to be, yes, a blotchy rash. Sometimes it's much darker purple than that, but just because it's not dark purple doesn't mean it's less serious. Yes, and we do know our bodies best. Oh, somebody raised a hand. Somebody have a question right now?
We'll put your questions in the chat, and then we'll take questions at the end.
So again, you know your body best. It is better to miss a dive while you get something checked out than to dive again, and then it's even worse. If you have just a little bit of DCS, some rash, and then you go dive again right away after your surface interval, your situation is going to be much more extreme. It's always easier to just call Dan than to wonder, than to, we can ask and talk to people, but again, the symptoms vary so much between each person based on your dive profile and your body shape and all those other factors, medications, age, that it's really better to make that phone call. The gaps in dive science. This is the big thing for us women. And, we know historically in science that often women haven't had the benefit of as much medical study as has been done on men. Diving was not a female predominated sport, especially in the beginning. And those Navy dive tables were all done on very fit Navy divers. And if you go back to the original studies, their body fat in those studies was 10 to 12%. It was a very different scenario than most of us, even different than most of the men we dive with. If you think 10, 12% body fat, that lets us know that, those tables are just based on those averages. And even the computer models in our dive computer, those are also based on averages. And one computer may be a whole different set of averages and models than another computer. So you might wear two computers and you're going to get a slightly different profile on those computers. So again, that dive computer is not you, it's an average. So we have to remember, it's not saying, oh, this is Adrian's, whole physical, it doesn't know me. It just knows what I'm doing out there. So just remember that. And, if in doubt, set your dive computer at a conservative profile. Sometimes it's just less time in the water, if you're not quite sure. But again, as more and more women are in the dive field, I think we're going to see more and more studies that include women. Patty now says that over 30% of certified divers are women. So I do believe that we are going to start seeing more studies that include DCS studies on women in particular. But right now what we have are tables and computers. Let's see, prevention. Again, we talked about hydration. That's one of the biggest ways to set ourselves up for success. Before that dive trip, start electrolytes and water a couple of days before. Don't wait until you're on the dive boat to go, oh, I need to hydrate. Start that ahead of time. It's not enough to just drink water, especially when you're in Thailand, when you're in Honduras in the summer and it feels like you can eat the air. It's so hot and humid. Start hydrating ahead of your trip. There's tons of different electrolytes that you can take on your trips, the tablets, the powders, all those things. Reducing your caffeine. I get it. It's hard for me. I'm a caffeine hound. And regularity, which is the next little square that Chev is about to pop up. You guys, travel, strange food, strange water. Traveler's diarrhea is one of the big dehydrating issues and DCS causes, especially in areas where traveler's diarrhea is so much more common. So, if you are worn out from having a sick stomach, you need to be mindful of that. Limit our sun exposure, in between dives. I know in Thailand a year and a half ago, I was laying up on the top deck of the boat in between dives, and at some point it was like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, because I'm just out there in the heat and then about to go diving. And again, limit your alcohol. Never drink before diving. I don't even drink the night before diving. It just is, it's not helpful. It's dehydrating. It's not good for our brains. So I think the jury is pretty clear that alcohol needs to be limited when we're diving. And then
Adrian, if I can, I remember that the effects of medication and alcohol are going to be amplified underwater, right? When you increase the pressure, it's like as if your body alcohol is 0.002, it's going to keep going up as if it's 0.004 and up as you go down. So that's why we don't drink before a dive, and then of course it dehydrates you. So don't drink it in general.
Yes, and that combination of alcohol and medications is never a good thing anyway. So on taking good care, yep. And so how to take care of yourself, make sure you wear the right coverage. Again, just because your friend doesn't need a wetsuit, if you get cold, people sort of tend to tease me because I get so cold, but it's better to be covered and be comfortable than to end up with DCS because you've been freezing the whole dive and your circulation has gone to hell because of that cold. Stay within your limits of diving. Know your limits. It's really important to know your limits. And take breaks. We all want to be the iron divers. We all have the fear of missing out. We want to see everything and go on every dive. But on a week or two long trip, you really need to take a day in there and take a break, at least take an afternoon, take a full day where you let your body rest and rejuvenate and rehydrate and all those things. So make sure to take breaks and take care of you. And get a dive computer. It's, I know it doesn't solve everything, but it does make a difference. Don't ever borrow a dive computer. Only use your own dive computer. But it is absolutely worth the investment. And there's a lot of choices now that are more economical when it comes to a good dive computers. Let's see. Ah, menstruation. I remember it well. And the dehydration, the diarrhea, all those things that happen with our periods. Just be mindful. And is anybody saying you can't dive? No, of course not. But just be mindful. Make sure you're getting enough rest. Make sure you're hydrating and drinking lots of water. You will feel better anyway, just for that. But be mindful of your body and how you're feeling. Again, repetitive dives. Are you eating enough? Are you drinking enough in between those dives? It's really important. Are you getting enough rest? I know, sometimes the dive trips, it can be like a slumber party too. But we need to get our rest. We need to go to bed and get our sleep night before diving. And again, our fitness. Are you sufficiently fit? Myra's amazing about telling us, the physical challenges of specific dive trips. And, some are far more challenging. We need to make sure, especially as we get older, that we're doing our cardio, that we're doing our weight-bearing exercises. It will make us better divers, safer divers, and better dive buddies too.
And this is a balance thing as well. As Adrian said, we're not saying that you have to be an Olympian to be able to dive. And you can dive with disabilities. Excuse me. Diving is a very adaptive sport. If you have a back injury, if you have issues lifting equipment, that's fine. You can still dive. There's ways to get around that. But the core issue, as we said, is your internal system, your circulation, your heart, taking care of your body from the inside out is why we say all of this. And I love there's always a mermaid on a trip that tells me, oh, I've been working so hard so that I can carry my gear up the ladder. I've been training so I can do this. And it's so cool and so empowering to see. But it's also, doesn't mean you can't die. You can't do those things. Just
That's right.
itself. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so we were very worried about going over time, so we went through this
I probably
very
went too
quickly.
fast.
But that's totally fine. Now we have a chance to chat a little bit. So a couple people popped some questions in the chat that I'll just go over in case anyone missed them. Josie had asked if you think you have skin DCS, do you have to go to the chamber? And the answer is, we can't tell you that. Only a doctor can tell you that. And you can never just go to a chamber and get put in. It's one of those things like a prescription. Like you have to get assessed medically, and then they will determine the treatment plan for you. Because usually it's more than one chamber treatment, and they have their own algorithm for how to do that. And it might go away on its own. So my story is I did actually give myself skin bends by accident because I'm from Canada and I was diving in cold water in Vancouver and drove home to my home where I was living in Kamloops, which is in the mountains. And I didn't wait enough time. And as I was driving up the mountain, I remembered. I saw the sign that said, "You're going to 3,000 feet." And I was like, oh no, I totally forgot. But I was on a freeway. I'm on a major road going up this mountain and I can't stop. And when I got home, I got a light rash on my thighs and on the inside of my arms here. But for me, the biggest thing was the fatigue. It was in the pandemic, and I spent 3 days in bed. I could not get out of bed. I was so tired. And, that's looking back, very silly on my part. I should have gone to the doctor right away, but it was the pandemic. So it was early pandemic. So, like, don't go to hospitals unless you have to, right? And so that elevation thing and taking care of yourself after the dive is very, very important. And yes, obviously it went away on its own, but I should have gotten oxygen, maybe a chamber, I don't know, but yeah, that's my story. Rebecca was asking about dive computer logs. And yes, absolutely, your dive insurance, the first thing they'll ask for is your computer. So something we didn't really mention was your profile as you're diving. So remember, as I said, the second you start to ascend, you're starting that off-gassing process. So if you're having a profile that's up and down like this, you're also increasing your risk because your body is absorbing and then releasing and absorbing and then releasing and absorbing as you're going throughout your dive. And they're going to check that in your computer. The other thing they're going to check for is that you were diving within your limits.
Mhm.
So if you dive outside your limits, if you go into DECO, if you're only certified to 18 meters and you go deeper or to 60 feet, they're going to check for those things. So a dive shop might be willing to take you to 100 feet as an open water diver, but if something happens to you, that could affect your insurance coverage. So just keep that in mind.
Mhm. Yep.
If someone gets a headache after diving, does that mean you have the bends? What do you think, Adrian?
You know, again, we can't answer that, but in general, just a headache. I think it just really depends on you and your body. And if you're not sure, if you are concerned, then you need to make a phone call. Just making a phone call isn't going to hurt anything. It's not going to cost anything. It'll take you a few minutes to do it. And the medical professionals at Dan can explain to you, they can ask you your questions, talk about your dive profile, and give you an idea of what your best course of action is.
And you can call Dan even if you're not a member.
Correct.
So if your dive insurance is through someone else, you can call them, that's totally fine. But you can talk to Dan and just ask their advice, even if you're not a paying member.
Yep.
Gail asked if there's any difference in risk for air versus nitrox. So this is a very good question. We were actually talking about this just before the call. Adrian or even Myra, do you want to let them know what we were discussing?
Well, particularly for Dan, what Dan says is that nitrox reduces the risk of decompression sickness, but it's a double-edged sword. If you exceed your maximum depth when you're on nitrox, then you run the risk of oxygen toxicity and having a seizure underwater. So, and that's not to be scary. I mean, you know what your maximum depth is, and generally you're not going to go over that. But you know, it's a little bit of a difficult question. Yes, it does tend to be a reduction of risk of DCS.
Yeah, and that's because there's less nitrogen in the air you're breathing, right? So if you're breathing 32%, now you only have, math, 68. Sorry,
But if somebody,
percent.
but to say is, and I know it wasn't the question, but some people say nitrox is safer. We cannot say nitrox is safer or not safe. It reduces the risk of DCS because you're breathing less nitrogen, but it's not necessarily safer.
Yes, exactly. So because you have that extra risk of exceeding your limits. But the nitrox, you have a higher percentage of oxygen. And so that exchange that's happening in your cells is now more oxygen, which is something your body actually uses. So instead of that nitrogen going into your body and being absorbed, now the oxygen, which is also why that you breathe oxygen after having, if you think you have DCS or any DCI, any decompression illness, you always treat with oxygen right away until you can get assessed because it never hurts and it can help. It doesn't help with everything, but it definitely helps with DCS.
Mhm.
And so by breathing that pure oxygen at the surface, you're helping your cells replace that nitrogen faster in your body. Rebecca had some high hopes for capitalism, but I don't think that's the case. As much as our privacy is violated by technology, I don't believe that they're collecting computer data for women to know.
I can't see the question that was asked. Can you
Oh,
repeat
okay.
it to me?
She said, I was hoping they'd used computer log to get better data than fit military men in tables, but maybe they're not doing a big data scrape. I don't think they are. For one, I mean, my Garmin asks me, but for most dive computers, they don't ask, they don't know if you're a man or a woman, your age, that kind of thing. A lot of computers don't connect automatically or at all to the internet or an app. Most of them do, and it's very convenient, but I doubt that would be an awesome use of those resources if they could. But
Maybe someday
no
AI
one cares,
can.
honestly. Or maybe you could, Rebecca.
That computer would need to know everything about us, medications, age, how much water we had today. I'm just not sure we're even close to being there yet. But yeah, I wish it was a little bit different than just Navy dive tables. And I really, I have no idea what each computer is modeling their information after. But if you contact Shearwater or Scuba Pro or whoever it is, they can give you an idea of what their model that they're using. But I think it's all pretty just general and average.
Yeah. Heather raised her hand, I believe.
I was
Heather,
going
did you
to
want to say something?
make a
Yeah.
comment on the headache thing, but I typed it in the chat. It could be exertion from CO retention. I've had that happen to me, but it's hard to say, like, why it is, calling Dan and saying, hey, what's up? As far as the tables go, I think Shearwater and Garmin both are using Bowman 16 right now, which says that the theory that they're using says that there's 16 different tissue compartments, and each tissue compartment processes the nitrogen differently. You've got fast, medium, and slow compartments. So I think most of the newer computers are using the Bowman 16 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's a good point. So everyone, this is Heather. She's going to be a guest on our next chat on part 2 for this DCS series, and she is an emergency responder and also a survivor of several DCS incidents.
Oh my gosh.
And, so we can't wait to hear about that. But yes, when we say that the diving is based on military tables, we don't mean that we're still using them. But going back a little bit deeper into dive science, military tables, they were designed to allow Navy divers to dive for a long period of time, but they would only do maybe one dive a day, but for a long time. Whereas the recreational tables we use now use different compartments so that you can do multiple shorter dives a day, which is what to do, right? But the science behind them and the off-gassing and everything is still based on a different type of human than most of us are. Not even just women, than most of us are right now.
Yep.
Think of like 60s Navy dudes. They're not in the same fit category as most of us. Thank you, Heather, for that. That was great. Leandra shared a little story here I'm going to read for everyone. I actually don't know what FWIW stands for. So she had the skin bands, a light pink rash that felt like a bruise just last week. And she contacted Dan. They connected her with a doctor at a hospital right away. She was evaluated, treated with oxygen and fluids, and then she was released once the rash disappeared, no chamber. So that was a really good lesson for her that it's not silly to call Dan. It's not silly to just ask them. Just ask and then wait. She had to wake up her buddy to come to the hospital with her. It's so easy, and this is also like a cultural, societal, social grooming thing with women. We are the last people to take care of ourselves traditionally. Like women, we will take care of everyone before we take care of ourselves. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to put yourself first. You need to. If you think something's wrong, ask. Just go talk to someone. You're probably going to be validated. No one's going to tell you you're being silly. You'll be taken seriously.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree. Yeah, and calling Dan they're never going to treat you like you're being silly at all. When you call them, they're going to take that very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rebecca is mentioning what I was just talking about too, about up downs, the yo-yo profile. So yes, does put you at higher risk because you're forcing your body to make those changes to pressure faster than it can keep up if you're doing your yo-yo dive. That's a technical term.
You know, by the
technical?
way, sorry, by the way, when you're at the deep part of your dive, the more your exertion is, the more likely you will have DCS. So that up and down, not only is the up and down issue, but it's that extensive exertion that can increase our risk for DCS. So it's just something to be mindful of. And there is a PDF we're going to share at the end that's Dan has a whole PDF on decompression sickness, and it's wonderful. It has some great information, and it's not terribly long.
Yes. So we'll share that in the Facebook event because I can't send PDFs in the chat. But the other thing is, the next slide here. If you want to know more, Heather just mentioned another resource as well. But if you are a Dan member, and if you log into your account, you will find a learning section where they have a ton of info. They have a ton of recordings and little mini courses that you can take about everything related to diving. And it's really, really interesting. So don't be afraid to filter through there and take some of their little courses. Most of them are like an hour to 3 hours kind of thing, but lots of good information there. Review your training materials. So I'm a PADI instructor, so that's what I'm familiar with. I'll let Adrian talk about SSI, but with PADI, you have to have your own materials so that you have lifetime access to them. That's their whole theory, so that you can access them at any time. And now with the e-learning, you just log into your PADI account and everything that you've ever studied is there. And so when I was saying that this is covered in the open water course, it is. And you can go and you can find that section on, and you can look at the pictures. They have better balloon photos than I did. And you can see the dive science behind, a little bit of it behind DCS factors and lung overexpansion injuries and all that kind of stuff. And it just really helps you understand the why of what we do. So when you're on a trip and Myra or I is telling you, hey, we think you're overweight, or hey, we think you're this, like the reason we're telling you that is so that you're not doing the yo-yo, so that you're keeping yourself safe, so that you're not overexerted. If you're overweighted, you're working harder to keep yourself at a certain level, right? And that's all part of the prevention process. So preventing everything from DCS to panic, right? Which are often related. Adrian, what's the course that you found was the best?
Stress and rescue absolutely changed me. But also, I took buoyancy 2 different times. I took an SSI buoyancy and a PADI buoyancy. And I don't know which I would say was better or not better. It's just the more I took it, the better things got. Because I was sort of the boat hoover when I first started diving. I was the one that was sucking the air up. Yeah, you know, continuing your education, and I think I told Chev this the other day. A lot of times when I'm on a long trip on my flight or whatever to go diving, I do open up my SSI app and I do review a lot of things. I review decompression sickness. I review, you know, the ins and outs of my dive computer and mess around with it and look at my consumption and this and that. You know, we have a lot of downtime when we're going on these trips, especially when it's halfway around the world. And all of that information is generally in our phone, our iPad. We don't have to carry a giant book around with us to have all that information at our fingertips. So, and she's right about Dan. The information and the little courses, there's just tons, and they're free courses through Dan. Now, if you do any of their, you know, life support things like that, that's a whole different thing. But all these you know, they have a whole course on decompression sickness, diving with diabetes, with asthma, with this, with that. It's all there to be had. And that's, you know, it's part of one of the things we pay for. Get your money's worth.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I'll make a shameless plug for the Scuba Mermaids Dive School. We do teach the rescue course at least 3 times a year. We're trying to do it a bit more often. And Myra and I are PADI professionals, so we're teaching the PADI course. But Myra has spent her career curating this to be as informative and as useful as possible and as applicable to women as possible. So her and I have created our rescue course that is based in PADI, but we have added so much and really enhanced it to be about women as women divers. So what do we do within our abilities in the event of a diving emergency, right? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we be a best dive buddy? And then when we do our retreats, we also teach a lot of workshops kind of like this. We talk about gear and issues for women in diving. You can see one of our past recordings called Dive Like a Girl, where I talk about skincare and hydration and diving on your period, hair care, all that kind of stuff. So there's awesome opportunities for women, even though diving has been a sport for men for the last 50 years. We're taking it back and making it fun. Yes. So that was my shameless plug. Come hang out with me in Cabo in November and get certified or do your rescue. Any other questions or anything you guys want to talk about? Someone shared an incident that they had. Heather's going to be sharing her incident with us next month. And we'll talk about insurance and why it's so important, and the resources available to you, and also how to access it. So how to go through the process properly so that you're covered by your insurance provider. And I'm going to pop the link in the chat here. It's also on the Scuba Mermaids Facebook page, or Scuba Mermaids Dive School Facebook page. Our event for March 9th, 7 p.m. Central, with Heather and myself, and incidents and insurance.
Oh, it was a good time.
It's always a good time.
I'm looking forward to hearing it all.
Yay!
Heather, I'm sorry to hear about your experiences, but it's helpful for all of us to hear it. So I'm looking forward to that.
I work with the Garmin people. I'm a tester for Garmin, and the guy that started the Garmin Dive Watch project is one of my dive buddies, and him and I have discussed Gareth Locke quite a bit, and I know he has spoken with Gareth a whole lot. This one's kind of boring, the Under Pressure book. I haven't gotten that much into it because it's kind of thick reading, but it's basically it's demystifying stuff and using things that happen as learning tools instead of just being all hush hush about it, which is, you know, one of my big things. The other one that I mentioned was the Deco for Divers. This is really awesome. It's great. It's easy reading. He's got a couple of, are you guys familiar with Mark Powell? He's one of the guys that I think does the Dirty Dozen. He's got a couple of YouTube videos. Really explains the Deco stuff very, very nicely. And I'll be probably referring to both of those a little bit in my, because after my experience, I was like, I need to know more. So that was exactly what I went and did. But yeah, good information in both of these, and Dan's website as well. I haven't gotten into their stuff, but I need to. It's on my list.
We will send or I'll make a post in the event for this, the Facebook event for this call with all these links that we're talking about, and I'll get those book titles from Heather so that you can see it all. We've got some hand raisers here. Go ahead, Kathy. Or, I think it might have been
Sorry,
an
it was a mistake. I was just going to say thank you so much for everything, ladies.
You're so welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Oops, I put February 9th on the Facebook event. Sorry. Thank you, Leandra. I'll fix that. It's March 9th. Okay, great. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. It's so affirming for all of us that you are here. And I mean, we had over 60 people live with us and lots more that'll be watching the recording. It means a lot to us. Myra and I started this project in the summer last year. Not really sure how it would go, and it's been so well received, and it's really exciting for us. Oops. So exciting. Through my phone. We just are something obviously we're so passionate about, and speaking with Adrian, she's so passionate about this. It was so fun to work with her on this topic, and we'll keep doing them. Let us know if there's something you want us to talk about specifically, if there's something in diving that you would love to know more about. In the past, I've done workshops on dive gear, on courses, on being a woman in diving, how to be a good dive buddy. We have a nitrox course, fish ID, shark conservation. And that's just been in the last 6 months. So there's lots of
Fish ID
opportunity.
was fabulous. I loved Fish ID.
Danny, it's so
Yes.
great. It's just so fun to work with so many passionate women. Like you can hear from Heather too, like how excited she is about these topics too. So I can't wait for our chat with her. You can always reach us at info@marhostedtrips.com. That is an email monitored by myself and Myra. We're pretty much online 24/7, so you can always reach us. And then here's our info here. I put all of our Instagrams on there if you want to give us a follow. And check out our website as well. And I also just launched our YouTube channel, as Myra mentioned. So lots of exciting project.
If anybody comes to Tampa Bay for a visit, reach out to me.
Yeah, we've got a great mermaid network. Yeah, thank you for being here. Such a wonderful chat, and we hope to see you all on March 9th with Heather.
Yes,
Thank
looking
you,
forward to it.
everyone.
Thanks, you guys.